Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to another edition of Crimes of the Week International. Representatives from Australia's Victoria Police are asking for the public's help this week as they search for the person or people responsible for the cold-blooded murder of a soon-to-be father. The disturbing situation began shortly before 12:30 a.m. on April 27th, when residents of Bride Avenue in the Melbourne suburb of Hampton Park were awoken by the sounds of multiple gunshots outside on the street. Police were called and officers arrived to find the body of 30-year-old Aaron Toth. He was sitting in the driver's seat of a Volkswagen Golf, which had been parked outside of a home there. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Surveillance footage taken near the crime scene showed a Ford Ranger utility vehicle fleeing the area right after the shooting. That same vehicle, which is said to have been stolen, was found roughly 2 hours later at Sweeney Reserve in the neighboring suburb of Berwick. It had been set on fire and was completely burnt out by the time it was recovered. At the time of this recording, no official motive has been released behind the drive-by shooting, though in statements given to the media, police admitted that the crime has, quote, all the hallmarks of a targeted execution. According to residents in the area, the house that Aaron was found outside of had been reported to police for suspicious activity a number of times previously. They say that people come and go at all hours of the day and night there, and that there are always different vehicles outside. Aaron lived a short drive away from the crime scene in Cranbourne, though it's still unclear what he was doing outside this residence at the time of the murder. Friends and family members of the 30-year-old carpenter described him as a fun-loving jokester who was always the life of any party. Adding further tragedy to the situation is the fact that he and his partner were expecting their first child in just a short amount of time. Victoria Police are asking for anyone with information about the crime to please come forward. Right now, no suspects have been identified and no arrests have been made. Officials in Nigeria say that they are searching for more than 100 people this week after extreme weather caused damage to a prison facility, allowing some inmates to simply walk out of the units where they were being held. According to reports, the whole thing began last week on April 24th, when the capital city of Abuja and the surrounding area were hit by extremely heavy rainfall. The downpour lasted for several hours, causing widespread flooding as well as damage to buildings. One of the most notable places to be affected was the medium-security custodial center in Suleja, a city about 25 miles northwest of the capital. As the torrent of rain came down, it not only damaged a perimeter fence at the facility, but it also caused part of the building where inmates were actually housed to crumble. At least 118 of those inmates seized the opportunity and immediately fled. At the time of this recording, local reports state that just 13 of the escaped inmates have been recaptured, but authorities claim that they are confident that the rest will soon be located. A widespread manhunt is currently being carried out, and prison officials are being aided by state security agencies. If you're a regular viewer of our Crimes of the Week International series, you'll likely know that this is far from the first prison break story we've covered out of Nigeria. In fact, reports estimate that more than 5,000 inmates have escaped from prisons across the country since 2020 alone. However, these prison breaks are usually the result of actual raids on these facilities, whereas this week's incident appears to be the result of crumbling infrastructure. This is just one of a host of other problems that has been plaguing the nation's prison system for years. This includes overcrowding, an issue that has been exacerbated by backlogs in court. According to prison officials, the problem has gotten so bad that a large percentage of the inmates they house have not even been convicted of crimes. Prisoners can spend years waiting for court dates, with one prison recently reporting that 70% of their inmates were still awaiting trial. While the Nigerian government has stated it's working to fix these issues, it remains to be seen exactly how they plan to tackle these problems. Authorities in the Welsh county of Carmarthenshire say that a 13-year-old girl is facing attempted murder charges following a violent incident at a school last week in which she allegedly attacked multiple people with a knife. The terrifying incident began just after 11:15 a.m. on April 24th, when students at the Ammon Valley School in the town of Ammanford had just finished a mid-morning break. Everyone was supposed to be on their way back into the building when a 13-year-old female student allegedly attacked another girl with a knife. While the official details of this attack have not been released, multiple local news sources have stated that the victim was stabbed in the stomach. The situation quickly turned chaotic as multiple staff members ran to try and intervene. Unfortunately, 2 of them were also injured, with one receiving knife wounds to a hand and arm and another being slashed in the neck. Those victims have since been identified as Assistant Head Teacher Fiona Elias and Special Needs Coordinator Liz Hopkin. According to reports, it was another teacher, Daryl Campbell, who finally brought the dangerous situation under control. After stepping in, Daryl was apparently able to disarm the 13-year-old suspect and put her in an arm lock until police could arrive. In the meantime, all of the school students were taken inside to safety, and the building was placed temporarily into lockdown. After being called to the scene, emergency responders rushed the 3 victims to hospitals for treatment. Thankfully, all are said to have suffered non-life-threatening injuries, and at the time of this recording, most of them have since been discharged. The 13-year-old suspect, meanwhile, was arrested and is now facing 3 charges of attempted murder, as well as possession of a bladed article on school premises. The following day, police announced that a second student at the school, a 15-year-old boy, had also been arrested. According to authorities, the teen made alarming statements on social media related to the attack, and a subsequent search of his home recovered a BB gun. It's unclear if the 15-year-old is connected to the 13-year-old suspect, though police say that they are currently investigating this. At the time of this recording, it's unclear what motivated the violent incident. Authorities in Ecuador say that a popular social media influencer and former beauty queen is dead this week after she was brutally gunned down in broad daylight by a pair of hired assassins. The disturbing crime took place on April 28th in the city of Quevedo. It was around noon, and 23-year-old Landy Paraga Goiburo had gone to a ceviche restaurant with a male friend. They were standing inside the business waiting for food when suddenly 2 armed men walked inside. As one of the men stood by the door, the other walked towards Landy and her friend and opened fire. The gunman shot the 23-year-old several times, continuing to shoot even after she fell to the ground. Her friend was also hit, though it appears that he was not critically injured. Once the attackers were satisfied that Landy was dead, they fled the scene. According to reports, Landy was a former beauty queen who had represented Los Rios province in the 2022 Miss Ecuador contest. She was a popular social media influencer in the country, having garnered over 1 million followers across her various accounts, and had also recently released her own sportswear line. The 23-year-old did not live in Quevedo, and instead was reportedly in town to attend a wedding which had been held the previous day. While no official motive has been released behind the murder at the time of this recording, many local news sources have speculated that Landy's death may have been the result of her alleged ties to organized crime. Early this year, it was reported that she had previously been involved in a romantic relationship with one of the country's most notorious drug trafficking figures, Leandro Norero. The relationship came to light after text messages were revealed to the public between Norero and his accountant. In the conversation, which is from July of 2022, the accountant tells Norero that police are asking questions about Landy. Norero can be seen begging the accountant to help make sure that his relationship with Landy stays a secret, particularly from his wife. That being said, it's not clear who would have actually ordered Landy's death, as Norero himself was recently killed in prison. At the time of this recording, police say that they are still investigating the situation, though so far, no arrests have been made. Authorities in the Pakistani port city of Karachi announced that they had concluded a more than 2-month-long murder investigation this week, revealing in the process the ridiculous alleged motive behind the crime. According to reports, the whole thing started on the night of February 8th of this year, when 17-year-old Ali Curio went to hang out with his friend Daniel Nazir at his family's home in the city's Defense Housing Authority area. They were joined by a couple other friends, as well as Daniel's girlfriend, Shazia. The evening was apparently going normally until Daniel ordered a couple of hamburgers for him and Shazia. However, things apparently went off the rails when the food arrived, and Ali took a bite out of the burger that was supposed to be meant for Shazia. This single, albeit immature act, reportedly sent Daniil into such a rage that he grabbed one of his father's guns and shot Ali. Though he and others then tried to take the teen to a hospital, the damage was already done. Sadly, Ali was pronounced dead a short time later. While Daniil was arrested almost immediately after the incident, it wasn't until this week that all of the information about the hamburger-related motive came out. Making things even worse, optically speaking, both of the young men involved are apparently the sons of important people within the local justice system. Ali's father is a judge, while Daniil's father is a senior superintendent of police. At the time of this recording, Daniil remains in custody and is currently awaiting trial for murder. After researching and writing about crime stories for several years now, I like to think that few things in this arena surprise me anymore. However, I gotta hand it to the guy in this next story. He is a living reminder that just when you think you've heard and seen it all, the universe has a way of one-upping itself in the ridiculousness department. A video clip went viral across Thai social media this week after a police officer posted an amusing interaction between him and a suspect. One in which the man can be seen offering a rather novel excuse for his drug use. The whole thing apparently took place recently when the unidentified suspect was arrested for possession and use of methamphetamine. While this on its own obviously wasn't that out of the ordinary, things took a hilarious and unexpected turn when police began talking to the man on their way back to the station. During the car ride, the man revealed what he said was the real reason he was buying and using meth. He claimed that he was doing it to, quote, protect the youth. Specifically, he said that he was only using meth so that teens would have less access to it. He claimed that he didn't even like the drug, though the actual video interaction between the unidentified man and the officers is in Thai. Thankfully, local news sources provided a rough English translation of the conversation. The officer behind the camera asked the man if meth is expensive, to which the man replies, quote, no, not at all. Very cheap. Too cheap. The officer then asks, well, if you don't like it then, why buy it? To which the man says, quote, without me, teenagers would have easy access. When the clip of the interaction was posted online, many understandably responded with jokes. One commenter wrote, quote, what a good man. Such a great sacrifice for the younger generation. Another chimed in that the man should be given a position with the public health authority. Even a news report we came across sarcastically pondered whether the man's, quote, heroic act would contribute to a reduction in his sentence. At the time of this recording, the man's identity has not been released. It's therefore unclear what charges he is currently facing. If you're a regular viewer of our Crimes of the Week International series, then you might remember that last week we brought you a disturbing story out of Japan. The case began just before 7 a.m. on April 16th, when police were alerted about a pair of burning bodies that had been left near a river in the town of Nasu, located in Tochigi Prefecture, north of Tokyo. Officers arrived to find an extremely unsettling situation. Not only were they able to confirm that these were indeed the badly charred bodies of two people, but it was clear that this was a murder. Both of the victims' hands and feet had been bound with zip ties, and their heads had been covered with plastic bags which had been sealed around them with tape. A portable gas canister was also found nearby. Those two victims were later identified as 55-year-old Yutaro Takarajima and his 56-year-old wife, Sachiko. Yutaro owned and operated several restaurants in Tokyo's Taito ward. At the time of last week's recording, one person had been arrested in the case, a 25-year-old man named Ryokan Hariyama. Hariyama turned himself into police one day into the investigation after his black car was linked to the crime. It's alleged the vehicle was used to transport the bodies, and bloodstains were reportedly found inside when police located the car and examined it. If you'll recall, though, it quickly became clear that the 25-year-old wasn't the only person that authorities were looking for. Following his arrest, Hirayama told authorities he had merely loaned his car to the actual perpetrators, and that he was paid to pick up supplies allegedly used in the disposal of the remains. CCTV footage appeared to back up what the 25-year-old said, as videos showed Yutaro and Sachiko in the company of different people on the night of April 15th, when it's believed that they were killed. Well, this week, authorities released another update stating that 3 more people had been arrested in the case. They have now been identified as 28-year-old Hikaru Sasaki, 20-year-old Kirito Wakayama, and a 20-year-old South Korean national named Kang Kwang-ki. According to police, Sasaki was taken into custody on April 29th when he was tracked to an airport in Okinawa. At the time, the 28-year-old was apparently planning to board a plane for a different undisclosed location. It's now believed that Sasaki is the person that Hirayama claimed had paid him and given him instructions for dealing with the 2 bodies. Additional security footage recovered since the time of our last recording reportedly shows the 2 men meeting in the early hours of April 16th, just hours before the victims were found. The other 2 suspects, Wakayama and Kang, were arrested on May 1st. It appears police believe that they were the ones who actually carried out the murders. While this is definitely a major update, many mysteries still remain in the case, including the underlying motive behind the murders. The situation also appears to be getting quite convoluted, as all of the suspects are apparently pointing fingers at each other. On top of this, if the latest reports are to be believed, there may still be more suspects yet to be identified and arrested. The situation is still under investigation. Representatives from the UK's London Metropolitan Police say that they are investigating the aftermath of a tragic and terrifying incident this week, after a man went on a rampage with a sword in a suburban area of the city, killing a teenage boy and wounding several other people. The whole thing began shortly before 7 a.m. on April 30th, when residents in the northeast London suburb of Int'l were awoken by the sounds of a loud crash. The noise turned out to be the impact of a grey transit van, which had just slammed into a property in the Thurlow Gardens area. The house is located just a short walk from the nearby Int'l subway station. Immediately following the crash, a couple concerned members of the public ran to see if the driver of the van was okay, assuming that it was an accident. However, things took a horrifying turn just seconds later when the person behind the wheel, a man in a yellow hoodie, got out and pulled out a large samurai-style sword. A 33-year-old Good Samaritan was stabbed in the neck by the man before he could react. According to some reports, this man was also hit by the suspect's vehicle. Alerted by the sounds of the collision and the screams of the victim and witnesses, other residents ran to see what was going on. They watched helplessly as the attacker got back into his van and drove further up the road. After arriving in a different part of the neighborhood, the suspect allegedly continued his rampage, targeting a new group of unsuspecting victims. The first of these, an unidentified woman, appears to have narrowly avoided a grim fate. After being approached by the attacker, the man asked her to speak to someone on his cell phone. She sensed that something was off and ran away just in time to see the suspect pull out his weapon, which he had temporarily concealed in his pants. Sadly, others weren't as lucky. Seconds later, the man allegedly turned his weapon on a teenage boy, 14-year-old Daniel Anjorin, who was on his way to school at the time. Others reportedly tried to yell out to him, but heartbreakingly, he wasn't able to get away. He was struck with the weapon in the head and fell to the ground. Another victim, identified only as a 35-year-old man, was attacked not long after. Even after police arrived at the scene, the situation still took some time to be brought under control. 2 of the first officers to confront the suspect allegedly sustained serious injuries as the attacker continued to run through garden areas and jump over fences, all the while heading towards the busy nearby subway station. The rampage finally came to an end 22 minutes after the first calls were made to 999, when the suspect was cornered on the driveway of a home. A female officer, who is now being applauded for her bravery, ran towards him and tasered him, after which other officers were able to move in and take him down. Even so, it reportedly took about half an hour to properly restrain the man once he was on the ground and get him into a police car. Sadly, several hours after the attack, it was announced that the youngest victim, Daniel Anjorin, had died from his injuries. The 14-year-old has been described as a positive and amazing young man who was called a true scholar by officials at the school that he attended. 4 other people were hospitalized as a result of the attack, including the 2 police officers previously mentioned. Thankfully, none of their injuries appear to be life-threatening, though it's been stated that one of the officers nearly lost a hand due to the injuries they sustained to one of their arms. As for the motive behind the awful tragedy, so far it remains a mystery. That being said, several witnesses reported hearing the suspect repeatedly screaming, quote, "Does anyone here believe in God?" before his arrest. For their part, police say they currently have no reason to believe that the attack was specifically targeted or terror-related. However, it's likely that more will be learned after the suspect himself is out of hospital for injuries he sustained during the incident. So far, the man's name has not been released, and he has been identified only as being 36 years old. The situation is still developing. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you'd consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much everyone, and take care.